Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really complex rivalry, one that mostly plays out away from the headlines. The conflict between Iran and Israel.
Mm.
It pops up a lot, but understanding what's really going on, how they fight, why it matters, it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
So our mission today is simple. Give you a clear, concise shortcut to understanding this whole thing.
Exactly. And that term you used, shadow war, it's perfect
Mm-hmm.
because this isn't, tanks and trenches.
Right. Not a declared war.
No, it's fought very differently through other groups,
Yeah.
proxies,
Yeah.
through cyberattacks, spying, intelligence ops, and sometimes he had targeted strikes, but often kept quiet or deniable,
It's layered.
complex.
Extremely. You need a lot of nuance to really get it.
Okay, let's unpack this then. What's truly at the heart of it? We hear about Iran's anti-Israel stance, Israel's worries about nukes. Is that the core?
That's certainly a huge part of it. Iran, as a Shia theocracy, yeah, it openly calls for Israel's destruction, doesn't see it as legitimate.
And Israel views Iran as its #1 security threat, period. But it's not just rhetoric.
Go on.
Israel is deeply concerned about Iran's practical support for groups like Hezbollah right there in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, groups that directly attack Israel.
So, direct threats on their borders.
Exactly. And then there's the big one, the nuclear program. Israel is convinced, absolutely convinced, that Iran is aiming for nuclear weapons.
Which they see as an existential threat.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's not just talk. It's about real power projection, real capabilities that could change the whole region.
Okay, so that's the why. Let's talk about the how. This is where it gets really interesting, the shadow war tactics. You mentioned proxies and cyber.
Right. The methods are unconventional, sometimes surprisingly so. Take cyber warfare. Both sides are constantly trying to hack each other's critical infrastructure.
Like the Stuxnet attack.
Stuxnet is the famous example, yeah. Believed to be U.S.-Israeli, it seriously damaged Iran's nuclear centrifuges. A huge blow delivered digitally.
Wow, okay, what else?
Then you've got Israel's pretty regular airstrikes inside Syria. They're hitting Iranian targets, Revolutionary Guard positions, weapons transfers.
Because Iran's backing Assad and building up its presence there.
Exactly. And these strikes aren't usually declared acts of war. They're targeted operations. Very precise.
And controversial things, too, like assassinations.
Yes. There have been multiple instances where Iranian nuclear scientists have been killed, and fingers often point towards Israeli intelligence, Mossad, highly controversial, of course.
Definitely.
And then there's the proxy war itself, Iran funding, arming, training groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, who then fight Israel directly. That's a core element.
A way to fight without direct confrontation.
Right. And sometimes you see drone and missile attacks coming from Iran or its allies towards Israel. Most get intercepted by Israel's defenses like Iron Dome, but they're clear signals.
So a whole range of tools, mostly indirect or deniable.
That's the essence of the shadow war. Inflict damage, deter the enemy, but try to avoid that all-out conflict. Now, things have felt, well, even more tense recently, especially after the Hamas attack in October 2023. We saw more action from Iran's allies, didn't we?
Absolutely. That attack seemed to really escalate activity across the board. More attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon, more from groups in Syria and Iraq against U.S. and Israeli interests.
And then came April 2024.
Yes, that was unprecedented. Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles directly at Israel at first.
A direct state-on-state attack.
A huge escalation. Now, Israel and its allies intercepted almost all of them, which was remarkable. But the act itself was significant.
And Israel responded.
It did, with targeted airstrikes against military sites inside Iran. But what's fascinating here, even with these direct hits, is how carefully both sides seemed to manage it. They hit back, but seemingly pulled back from the brink of a full-scale regional war.
Because the consequences would be catastrophic. You have to assume that's the calculation. Both sides know a wider war could be devastating, not just for them, but for the entire Middle East. So there's this strategic restraint, even amid major provocations.
It really shows how interconnected everything is. So let's connect this to the bigger picture. Why should someone listening, maybe far away from the Middle East, care about this shadow war?
Well, the ripples spread much further than you might think. First, any major escalation almost inevitably involves the U.S. because it's such a close ally of Israel.
Right, the U.S. commitment to Israeli security.
Exactly. Then you have the Arab nations like Saudi Arabia. They oppose Iran, they see it as a rival, but they also fear widespread chaos in their neighborhood. A war would destabilize everything.
And the economy. Oil.
Absolutely crucial. Iran sits on the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point for global oil shipments. Any major conflict there could severely disrupt oil supplies and send energy prices soaring worldwide.
So it impacts security alliances, regional stability, and potentially everyone's wallet.
Pretty much. The stability or lack thereof in that region has global consequences. It's not just a distant problem.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive. We're looking at a conflict that's not a declared war, but a really dangerous ongoing struggle, driven by ideology, religion, nuclear fears, and a raw fight for regional power. And even when things escalate dramatically, like we saw recently, there seems to be this cautious edge, this awareness of just how bad a full war could be.
That's right. They push, they test limits, but seem determined to avoid the abyss so far.
Which leaves us with a final thought, perhaps.
Well, it raises a key question for you to think about. Given how this conflict evolves, always finding new, often unexpected ways to operate, what might be the next phase of this shadow war?
Another cyber attack, something totally new.
Could be anything.